Hey everyone, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scottsy Business, and today we're going to be talking about decentralization and how it really feels like it's under attack from centralized institutions. Namely, what I'm going to be talking about are how stablecoins are so easily centralized and controlled, and they can freeze transactions, revert transactions, freeze your USDT that's in your decentralized wallet. Very sketchy stuff. Crypto exchanges freezing Canadians' funds, blacklisting Bitcoin, bank accounts being frozen, banks and stock exchanges preventing you from trading Russian stocks, which essentially means they're telling you what you're allowed to invest in. And if you already invested in Russian stocks, you're basically screwed at this point. You're going to lose all your money. That goes back to what I've always said, invest locally. Mind you, none of this is financial advice. But that's really just for stocks, the investing locally. And then lastly, we'll be talking about how exchanges were then also demanded to ban all Russian civilian crypto accounts by the Ukraine vice prime minister. And we'll take a look at that on Twitter as well. But because it wasn't a real legal order, almost all exchanges refused except for Binance and a couple others. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about what might happen if there is a legal order. So we're going to get into all of this craziness and how it really feels like decentralization is under attack right now, after a quick word from my sponsor.
A big thank you and shout out to my sponsor Cake Wallet, which is an open source, non-custodial Bitcoin and Monero wallet that also has a built-in exchange. It's available on iOS and Android.
Thanks again to my sponsor. So let's jump into this. First, we'll talk about what happened previously with all the protests that were happening here in Canada. Our prime minister enacted emergency orders and then that allowed him to essentially freeze bank accounts, do a lot of very intense financial things that you could never do previously, and do it all without any law involved, no judicial oversight whatsoever, no rationale for why you're doing the things. You can just do anything you want. That was very, very concerning. And I'd previously made a video talking about how, this stuff doesn't happen very often and it's fairly uncommon, but it can happen. And now we're seeing it's rapidly increasing the commonality of things like this happening. And they blacklisted Bitcoin and cryptocurrency donations from centralized exchanges. Even the exchanges themselves, like the CEO of Kraken came out and said, there's nothing we can do about this. This is a legal order. We have to comply. Don't leave your crypto on exchanges. I'm going to do a future episode specifically going through all the many exchanges that have had problems, which is almost all of them. And just going through a bunch of instances is why you never leave crypto on exchanges, as well as like Quadriga CX, taking everyone's money and then the owner supposedly dying. All these different times where exchanges have done terrible, terrible things. I'm going to do all that in a future episode. But them blacklisting Bitcoin is very concerning because the average person isn't going to find a way around that. You can coin join, you can go to a Bitcoin ATM. There's a lot of ways to get around it, but the average person probably isn't very aware of those. Plus, there's still issues of like, if I sell my blacklisted Bitcoin to an ATM and someone else buys it, then they could use it on an exchange and then they'll get screwed and they'll lose all their money. So there's a lot of caveats there that kind of complicate everything, but realistically, it just shows that you need to have your own wallet. You need to know about the ways to be able to access crypto without a centralized exchange. And at the very bare minimum, you should be only patronizing exchanges that don't ask for KYC verification from you. Continuing on, stablecoins are not safe. The best example is USDT because it is the most widely used and it's also the most widely investigated, and people are the least confident in the accuracy of the backing of their crypto, because it should be a dollar backed 1-to-1 more or less with their pegged currency. They came out with their own audit and said it was like much less, and they've got all this other stuff going on too, but we also don't know how legit that is. They've had many investigations, lots and lots of stuff going on, but all of the sketchiness aside, they can freeze any transaction. They can undo it. They can freeze the USDT that's in your crypto wallet, in any wallet, at any time, with ease. That's about as centralized as it gets. That's actually more centralized than the actual fiat system, because if you have cash, then they can't take that away from you. But it's the exact same as your like bank account. Though it's much easier for them to control everything, because you might have to contact a different bank to freeze a transaction or do whatever. Whereas USDT Tether, they just have control of everything all at once instantly. So it's like they control all of the banks versus just one of the banks. That is extremely, extremely, extremely concerning, and a good reason as to why you should never be using centralized USD or any fiat pegged currencies that have total centralized control over that currency, because your money is not safe. If you're putting your money into crypto to get away from all of that nonsense, to avoid financial censorship and all these things, the last place you're going to go are stablecoins like Tether. Moving on. Banks and stock exchanges are preventing you from trading Russian stocks. This is fairly recent based on what is happening with Ukraine and Russia. But the reason that this is so concerning is that not only are banks and stock exchanges now telling me what I can or can't invest in, and they're basically telling you what you should be investing in by telling you what you can't invest in. What that really means is they're, in a way, being able to sort of manipulate and control the stock market. And they're showing us now that they can do this basically overnight. It was very quick. Many Russian banks have gone down 99%. Everything is tanking. No one can even sell and get out. So they really screwed everyone. Just anyone in the world who is doing foreign investing, people in Russia, all of these people got screwed over by the institutions, governments, etc. The people who are really hurting are probably less likely to be the really wealthy people, because, well, obviously it's going to affect them. They probably have so many different, backups, gold, real estate, all these different things. The poor people who invested, 10 grand into a stock account, or just have money in the bank, or have bought a little bit of crypto or whatever, all of these people are the ones being affected. Or someone who's new in investing and they got some random tip from their coworkers, so they bought some Russian stocks, whatever it happens to be. It's the average, retail investor who's really getting hit with a lot of this stuff. And especially people in Russia, just ordinary civilians who are not doing anything wrong whatsoever, but they're being 100% targeted in all of this. I think that's very, very, very concerning. And it just keeps reinforcing what I've been saying, that stocks are much more centralized than you think. They have all of the same problems that I've been, criticizing fiat for, and all these centralized institutions. A lot of people, including myself, used to look at stocks like, yes, while this is fairly centralized, it's such a regulated and legitimized ecosystem that I shouldn't have any concerns about risks. And if anything, the risk should be as low as possible. And it should be more risky to invest in cryptocurrency. It's starting to flip now that we're seeing that they can control what you're allowed to invest in. They can just stop you from selling, and you can just lose all of your money from all of your investments. Today, or, recently it was Russia. It could be anything in the future. I have a lot of friends who invest in foreign companies because they're hoping that they're going to, explode and take off. Who knows if they get sanctioned? Like, the point is that now that we know how easy it is, and we've seen it all play out, you have to understand that it can happen again. It likely will happen again. And the only smart thing to do is to then prepare for that situation to occur again. And the best way to prepare for them blocking you from investing and doing whatever you want with your money is to invest in decentralized or through a decentralized medium or technology, like a lot of the blockchain technologies that we have available, and not through stocks. Again, I myself fell for the idea that the stock system is so regulated and legitimate that something like this would never happen. People's bank accounts being frozen, stock accounts being taken away, like we saw here in Canada. And then on the flip side, also stock exchanges around the world and banks around the world all blocking Russian trading. So we're seeing how easy it is. They're not really like asking the people if they're okay with it, like, because it's our money. The banks are all holding our money, but they're the ones making the decision what we're allowed to do with our money. And once you kind of see this and internalize this, I would hope that most people would be afraid to leave their money in the bank. And I'm not saying it in like an alarmist way, but in a security way, like and risk tolerance and your exposure to risk. You don't want to have the possibility that someone can just stop you from selling your funds or stop you from withdrawing your funds or selling out of your assets or whatever it happens to be. The interesting thing is that if this happened in any other capacity, it would be like fraud and a scam. If you're prevented from accessing your funds with no legitimate reason, like just being a Russian citizen who's done nothing wrong, or like many people here in Canada who donated $10 to a cause so people could get water or something, who had their bank accounts frozen, we're seeing that it's very, very easy. And the only way to get out is through decentralized technologies. I'm not going to keep beating that over the head. Let's talk about, I'm going to share my screen here to show the tweet from the Ukraine Vice Prime Minister. So here we have the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine saying he wants exchanges to block the addresses of Russian users. He's not just saying, well, he says here, not only the addresses to politicians, but also to sabotage ordinary users. Not even just to be safe, let's freeze their accounts, but he wants them to sabotage ordinary users, like specifically going after normal, innocent people and targeting them. Most exchanges said no. Like they should have, obviously. But you had Binance agree to do some of the politicians. Most exchanges refused across the board because there is no legal implications from this. This is just a foreign, like the vice prime minister of a foreign country just saying something on Twitter. This isn't any legitimate request, right? But because we already saw it here in Canada, if there was a legal order to do this, all of the exchanges that are centralized would absolutely do it. The takeaway is that you should only trade on decentralized exchanges to avoid this from ever happening. You should trade on exchanges that don't have KYC so that generally they can't tell where you are or who you are or whatever. And you could use a VPN if you want to be extra safe so that they also aren't just geo-targeting you. But more or less, it just shows what is possible. Because if they do come out and say that you have to ban them, they all will, because we've already seen that's the case. And they've even said that, do keep in mind that if that does happen, they will have to comply. A lot of exchanges said that as well. So you got to be wary of that. One of the only exchanges that did actually go through with it and actually started blocking accounts and transactions and everything is DMarket. And I mean, I'm going to assume that it's largely because they're based out of Ukraine and they're probably forced into it. But needless to say, it has to be pointed out that something like DMarket, which is supposed to be a decentralized market for NFTs, they call themselves a decentralized cross-game marketplace. It's not decentralized because instantly they're able to just block entire countries from accessing this based on nothing other than like there is some political tensions between the countries and the governments, but not really the civilians. And then they're punishing the civilians for what the governments are doing. And that's obviously terrible. But what's worse is that they say that they're decentralized. They're obviously not. This isn't that important, but it's really just to go back to the thing that I'm always reminding people of. Just because they say they're decentralized literally means nothing. Unless they are decentralized by design, meaning they can't not be that way if they decide to just block all of a country's accounts and then not be decentralized anymore. No, it has to be by design that they can't change it. Very, 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 very few projects, services, platforms, etc. ever actually even get close to this. Hive, I would argue, is as close as we currently have to actual decentralization. For the most part, it's used as a buzzword. And at the very least, it's that you hope that there isn't going to be any censorship and that that's kind of what they're sticking to. But the second you see them do something that clearly shows that they're centralized, they've shown their hand, and now you know they are not decentralized. And if they argued that they were, it would probably just be like, oh, well, the NFTs are still like in the accounts and we're not able to stop you from getting your NFTs, but you can't trade on this platform, but the NFTs are still decentralized. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're getting too much into the weeds. A lot of platforms like this will say metaverse, NFTs, decentralized blockchain, because those all together make people think, and cross-chain. Well, it goes cross-chain, so I could just switch to a different chain. It's the metaverse, so it's like free and open and all of these buzzwords. It's on the blockchain, so it must be secure, and it's decentralized, so it must be safe, and all these things. And it's like, no, those are all buzzwords. It's not actually keeping you secure or safe or any of these things. Again, I'm not really trying to go after demarket. I don't even use it. I don't even really care about it. But it was just one good example of an exchange that was more than happy to comply with just someone saying, do this thing with no legal order, and them without being forced to, presumably, they are happy to centralize, in a centralized way, ban and freeze and prevent users from doing what they would normally be able to do. That is very, very concerning to me. And that's really all I wanted to point out and focus on and call out, because while I could care less about what demarket is doing, it's just a good example to show not everything is as good as what their About Us says about the company, right? You just look at their actions, not what they say they are. If you're a little more technically, you got some more technical aptitude, you could probably look into it yourself and try to figure out whether or not it was really decentralized. But it's easiest to just, do like little litmus tests, like, okay, have they banned people, or do they require your identity so that they can see if you're Russian and then ban you in the future? If it's really decentralized, they don't need any of your information or any of these kinds of things. And they don't have the oversight to be able to just be kicking people out and doing all these things. The reason why that's also such a big deal is because if they are really centralized and something happens, like the SEC goes after them or whatever, then the whole thing is going to come toppling down if it really is centralized, if they can just go and shut everything down. But if by design they cannot, then if the SEC sues them or whatever happens, it's not going to be an issue for that blockchain if it's actually decentralized. This is why it's so important, and decentralization as a concept, as a whole, feels like it's really under attack with all the stuff that's going on. And I think decentralization is really one of the core concepts and ethos and values of blockchain technology and what it's there to achieve for people and the solution that it is providing. What we're seeing is just more and more and more centralization and poking and them testing to see what they can get away with and what people will tolerate. The only way to show that you're not okay with this is to stop investing through banks, stop investing in stocks at all, start using technologies that are decentralized, use cash, use gold, use cryptocurrency, but don't use centralized services. I mean, cash is centralized, but at the very least, they're not going to be able to censor you in your usage of it like you would with digital fiat, obviously. So I think this is very, very important. This is probably only going to get worse. I think we're at the beginning of this like mass centralization attempt. I'm still 100% bullish on where crypto is going in the future. I'm becoming much more bullish on privacy related cryptocurrencies. But, you know, regardless, as I said earlier, the result of having your funds taken away from you or frozen or prevented having access when you haven't actually done anything to warrant it, I would still say in 99% of situations, 99.999%, you still shouldn't have your assets frozen unless it was objectively 1000% provable that it was for something very, very bad, like, you know, sex trafficking or something really terrible. Then that makes sense. When you don't have that, when it's just ban all people from a country because that country is doing something wrong, or here in Canada where it's like you just donated to the wrong cause, and it's retroactive. So if it was a good cause at first and became a bad cause, then anyone who donated to the cause is now bad. It's just very, very silly and ludicrous, really. The point is, this is, in any other industry, this would be considered like fraud or a scam, basically. Or in any other type of service that wasn't so authoritative, it would be considered like a scam because your money is being taken away from you for no legitimate reason and your access is being blocked. And that would generally be what we would call a scam. A perfect example is Squid Game token, where people had their access prevented from being able to sell or trade or use the token. They didn't do anything wrong to deserve this, and yet that is what happened. That was a scam. You could use that same description to describe what has happened in Canada and what is happening in Russia. You tell me, have I got this mixed up? Are things a little crazy right now? You tell me. I think this is some of the most egregious forms of financial censorship that I've seen in my entire lifetime. And the tools are all becoming more and more sophisticated. So the best thing that you can possibly do to deal with any of this is to just find decentralized ways to grow, store, and secure your wealth. Let me know what you guys think about all this. How important is decentralization to you? Do you think it's under attack? Where are we going to be in 5 years from now? Are we going to end up going more decentralized or more centralized? What are you doing to try and stay ahead of all of this? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching to the very end. And you can let me know that you did by commenting #1ham in the comments below. And that way I know you watched the full video. Anyways, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scottsy Business, signing off. Cheers.